The first chapter of every book in this series is an action scene, where the Hardys survive a dangerous death sequence. In this book, they're forced to rappel down a burning office building. It's neat how the Hardys get introduced as action heroes. The problem is that the throwaway mystery at the start of the book is sometimes way more interesting than the real mystery. Like this book, I would much rather read about a corrupt arsonist lawyer than a group of hippies in the desert.
Argofunk Book Review, Argofunk Book Review.
Let me talk a bit about the female Hardys. I like them more in previous series, where they occasionally help solve mysteries and stop culprits. In this series, they get a definite downgrade. Laura Hardy is a research librarian who gives lectures on whatever information is relevant to the plot. Aunt Trudy is, it's painful that they changed her name from Gertrude to Trudy for no reason. Aunt Trudy is a mean old lady who yells all the time. Neither woman knows that Frank and Joe work for ATAC, so in every book, they almost discover the boy's secret until they're fooled by a lame excuse. It was definitely better when the female Hardys were crime fighters instead of dopes who constantly get fooled. The Hardys go to school. Brian Conrad is there. Brian Conrad is always there. He's mad because Chet was checking out his sister. Brian gets revenge by defeating Frank in fencing class. Brian, being overprotective of his sister, wins an award because this book takes place in California and he won't appear again. Actually, we don't see too much of Brian in this series because most of the books take place outside of Bayport. Why did they even bother introducing a Bayport rival in the non-Bayport series? Inside Frank's locker is a new mission from ATAC. They put the CD into their handheld gaming system. There were no handheld gaming systems that used CDs in 2005. Their mission is to investigate Arthur Stench. With a name like Stench, you know he's a villain. He runs an eco-friendly compound where people are creating alternate fuel sources. There are rumors he uses extreme methods to get what he wants. The first person they meet at the compound is a redhead named Petal Northstar. Joe thinks that she's hot, just like Pebbles Flintstone. You know, the toddler? That's what Joe is into, cartoon toddlers. Either Joe is creepier than I thought, or this 2005 author has no idea who teenage boys are attracted to nowadays, so they just put down the first name they could think of. Either way, I'd keep your Fruity Pebbles locked up whenever Joe is around. Petal is, whoa, what's this? Every book in this series has suspect profiles. This is a neat way to keep track of the suspects. The problem is that the profiles sometimes give us spoilers. For example, it spoils the fact that Petal is here on the compound under an assumed name. Petal has a crush on Frank, much to Joe's chagrin. We meet all the other people on the compound. Some of them are a little out there, like an Einstein wannabe and a man who wears solar-powered clothing. Some of them are more normal, like the teenage guy and the scientist who creates water for everyone. He creates water in a small tent with no machines or computers. He's a scientist who deserves a Nobel Prize. Seriously, that is the kind of discovery that could change life on our planet. There would no longer be any more droughts. We meet Stench, who is pretty suspicious. He lives in a private building which is closed to everyone except him. He carries a sword with him at all times, and he has a personal bodyguard named Mondo. The suspect profile says Mondo is caught using steroids and flying into violent rages. That's another problem with the suspect profiles. They talk about interesting events which don't occur in the books themselves. I wanted to see the scene where Mondo flies into a violent rage, but it never happens. Stench has a mission for everyone. He drives them to town with his solar-powered minivan, and he tells them to throw paint on the locals, because attacking innocent bystanders is somehow related to helping the environment. The townsfolk form an angry mob and chase our heroes away. The angry mob reappears that night and destroys half the compound. Stench gets revenge by sneaking into town and blowing up a car at a car lot. So it's official. Stench is a violent maniac. Frank and Joe congratulate themselves on successfully completing their mission, and no. At this point, they break their cover by trying to tackle Stench. even though he has a sword and a bodyguard. The Hardys are forced to run away and hide in a compost heap to avoid capture. They break into Stench's private building and discover the entire compound is a scam. Stench is purposely making the eco-friendly people seem violent and unhinged because he's being paid by oil companies to discredit them. I'm not sure why oil companies want to discredit this particular group, seeing as they're mostly teenagers who live in the middle of nowhere, but whatever. Stench decides to end everything by crashing a helicopter into the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. There's a big fight, and the Hardys are saved by Petal. It turns out her real name isn't Petal. She's secretly an undercover detective. Oh wow, I never would have guessed. We did the exact same thing in the previous book. She's still not interested in dating Joe, though. I think he lost her with that Pebbles Flintstone comment. Dad shows up just in time to arrest Stench and give new motorcycles to Frank and Joe. They got flat tires on their motorcycles from the previous book. Obviously, it's easier to buy a whole new motorcycle than it is to buy new tires. The end. Post-book follow-up. Frank and Joe got flat tires while driving to the compound. It takes 3 full chapters for them to get there. While it was interesting to see them struggle through the desert on foot, in the back of my mind, I was complaining about how we're on chapter 5 and the mystery is still nowhere in sight. We definitely would have gotten to the mystery faster if we hadn't spent the first 2 chapters on things we won't see again, like the corrupt lawyer, Brian Conrad, and the female Hardys. Speaking of things we won't see again, Frank and Joe use sign language to communicate in this book. That's a useful way for them to talk to each other without being overheard. They should do that more often, instead of once and never again. Overall, I would say this is not a good mystery. There are plenty of suspects, sure, but there aren't any crimes until Stench orders everyone to attack innocent town people. That's not a mystery, that's the culprit revealing themselves outright. Mystery aside, the book is moderately interesting, and the suspense scenes are well done. I give Hardy Boys Undercover Brothers number 2, Running on Fumes, a 6 out of 10.